Hello humans, welcome back to a brand new video. Welcome back to my world of stuff. Excuse the dishevelled look, Saturday and I ain't going anywhere, so I'll leave the shaving for a little bit. Now I've come on to do a new video because this little beauty has arrived in the post today. I wasn't expecting it to come today because I've ordered it. It's season 8 of Doctor Who on BluRay, incidentally, if you weren't able to read it. There we are. I ordered it back in, I think it was November when it was announced it was coming out, and I ordered it from zoom.co.uk, and I noticed that people online have been receiving this set, but mine hadn't arrived. I looked on the website and it was updated as saying it was in the warehouse, so I wasn't expecting it to come today. Bit peeved because I could see that other people were receiving theirs, and I really wanted to have a look at it because I'm a big fan of these sets, as I'll talk about in a minute. And then all of a sudden at midday, bing, Mr. Postman arrived with a nice little parcel. So this video is sort of an unboxing, although I have unboxed it hours ago and I've watched some of it. So I'm just going to take you through the box and show you what's in there, and do a little review of what I've seen of the set and the contents so far. Now I'm a big fan of these box sets. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I haven't done any Doctor Who content yet, but there's some stuff in the pipeline. But I'm a big fan of Doctor Who since the 60s. I've collected the whole series on VHS back in the day. I collected it all on DVD. And yes, I was sceptical about the new Blu-ray box sets because I thought, well, most of this stuff is filmed on videotape in the 60s and 70s. How good can it look? But I've been drawn in mainly by a lot of the new features that have appeared on these sets. If you've been collecting them, you'll know that there's an extraordinarily even fantastic selection of new value-added material. And the thing about Doctor Who now is it's been so well documented over the years in books and documentaries themselves on TV and so on. And on the DVDs, there's a massive collection across the beginning of the range, from the beginning of the range. It really chronicles everything you could possibly want to know about the history of Doctor Who. I don't think there's much we don't know about how Doctor Who came into being, its place in the cultural landscape in the 60s and 70s, how it changed, how it developed, the ins and outs, the gossip, behind the scenes stuff. We know it all now. And there are books, countless books now available on the subject, so there's not a lot more that we can probably find out about the history of the show, especially as sadly so many of the movers and shakers from the early days are no longer with us. But the Blu-rays take a slightly different approach now. They've obviously collected up all the episodes that have been released and all the documentaries that have already been released, put them on these new Blu-ray sets and created some new documentaries. And those for me are the main attraction because they're such brilliantly considered pieces. Every one of these box sets has Dr. Matthew Sweet, the academic and huge Doctor Who fan, who sits and talks to one of the cast of the series, whether it's Tom Baker, Peter Davison, various people involved in the show, Bonnie Langford, surprisingly an interesting one on the box set that was released for her. And he has like an hour and a quarter chat, which isn't just all about Doctor Who, it's about their lives and their attitude to life and their careers in general. And interesting documentaries, which take a sideways look at the making of Doctor Who, if you like, by looking at aspects of the show people might not have considered before, or certain people who perhaps haven't had the attention they should have done. I mean, particularly on, I think the season 14 set, which came out last year, is absolutely beautiful documentary commemorating the life and times of Elizabeth Sladen, who's one of the Doctor Who legends who passed away a few years ago. Plus, I have to say, even though I was sceptical of any potential improvement in the quality of these things, because we know that Blu-ray is the sort of high definition format of choice, although of course 4K has sort of come along since then. But they really, the restoration work that's done on these things, I mean the ones that have come out so far have just looked as if they were made yesterday. They look pristine, they look fantastic. And on that basis alone, once I'd sampled them, I thought, well, I'm going to have to collect these. And I've even collected the ones in the box of the seasons I'm not hugely keen on. I've got the Trial of a Time Lord season. I've got the Sylvester McCoy season that's being released. I'll be getting the new Sylvester McCoy one that's come out because it's maybe it's OCD type completion thing. Once you start a collection of something, especially like this, where you can collect them all, then I feel sort of compelled to get them. But it is that extra value-added material which adds a little bit of something extra to what we know about Doctor Who. So what I'm going to do, I have watched, as I said, I've unboxed this. I've watched a lot of it. I've watched a lot of the material. I've sampled some of the episodes, so I can give you a sort of a quick review of what I've seen so far. But what I'll do at the moment, I'll just open up the set and show you how it looks, show you how it's presented. You've probably seen it on other videos already, but that's not to stop me. So here's the box. So here we go. Here's the set, season 8, the collection on Blu-ray. It's the usual format. If you're familiar with the sets, you'll know how they look, you'll know how they're presented, and it's the usual beautiful piece of artwork from Lee Binding, I believe, which depicts the Doctor, John Pertwee, holding the dematerialization circuit, which he steals from the Master's TARDIS in Terror of the Autons. And as usual, you get beautiful images of some of the main adversaries, featuring the Master, Guardian of the planet Duxarius, Azal, an Axon, and a Daffodil Auton, all coming in the usual very, very nice box, as you can see there, with the usual I think they call them L cases, L-ray case. I should just take this out as much as I can, which is going to be easy because I'm holding the camera in one hand. So I'll just ease it up with the box. This is very professional. Here we are. Right, okay. Here's the set. So there's the box. As you can see, it's got the usual details of what's on there. Updated special effects in conversation with Katie Manning behind the sofa. So it's all the new bits and pieces, plus new surround sound mixes, extended editions, just hours and hours of stuff. I'll go into more detail reviewing it shortly, but that's just the actual casing. And then you get to the set, and you get, as you can see, you get as you open it up, you get the usual beautiful interior illustration on this sort of gate type packaging, which is sealed up. You open it up, nice illustration of the Doctor and Joe in front of the radio dishes from Terror of the Autons. Inside is the usual, it's a 32-page booklet about the season, which has got the same cover, and again, of course, it's full of behind the scenes information about the making of the season, back in business, how season 8 came to be, new artwork, and just lovely sort of liner notes about the whole season, which is always an interesting read, despite the fact that as veteran Doctor Who fans, we do know most of this stuff. The discs themselves, of course, are packed in the usual box set fashion. So you've got disc 1, which contains Terror of the Autons. They've got Mind of Evil on disc 2. Disc 3 is Claws of Axos. Disc 4 is Colony in Space, which I think is very underrated serial. Sort of John Pertwee's first trip out into space. I do think that's actually a pretty good story, but it doesn't get a good press, unfortunately. Then you get the part 2 of Colony in Space, actually, because it is a 6-parter, so it's spread across 2 discs. Then you get the Demons on disc 6, which again is one of the classic Doctor Who serials, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Disc 7 is also the Demons. This has got a very interesting 90-minute omnibus edition back in the 70s. Although we didn't get to see 60s Doctor Who or Out of Doctors, the BBC would often edit up 4-part or 6-part stories into hour-long or 60-minute, 90-minute specials, and that's what we've got with the Demons. I don't think it's been shown since 1972, I'm thinking off the top of my head, so it'll be interesting to see how they sort of edited that down, because it's been years since I've seen it. And disc 8, the final disc, is where the bulk of the new material, the value-added material, lies. So that's the lay of the land. It's the usual format, with beautiful illustration on the front. You've got the usual Doctor Who, the collection on the cover, on the spine, and a nice illustration of the TARDIS hurtling through the vortex on the back cover. That all fits very, very nicely into the case, at least it will do. So apologies for the fumbling camera work here. I haven't yet got to tripod-y thing to do this sort of thing. But that's season 8 of Doctor Who on Blu-ray, which is out on Monday, but is arriving now if you've pre-ordered it. And sadly, if you haven't pre-ordered it, I think it's going to be very hard to get hold of it now, because these things do tend to sell out. They are limited editions, so you've got to be quick with these boys. Anyway, that's what it looks like. But what does it look like? So there you go, a slightly wobbly look at the new season 8 Blu-ray box set. Wobbly in terms of camera work, apologies for that. I'm no Steven Spielberg, never said I was. So I have, as I said, I've watched some of this. So although they said I can unbox it, I unboxed it hours ago. There was no way I was going to faff about when there was new Doctor Who material to watch. And I've sat down and I've sampled some of it. I've watched the new value-added material, and I've had a look at the episode. The problem with this season of Doctor Who, as a lot of you will know, back in the 70s, the BBC didn't value their archive material the way they do these days. Obviously it wasn't commercialised, they weren't selling their shows back to the public and so on, and the repeats were few and far between. Particularly Doctor Who suffered, as we know. There are 97 missing episodes from the whole canon of Doctor Who, and even the colour episodes weren't immune to the BBC's policy of getting rid of stuff they didn't think was much use to them, because they had limited storage space. You could see that problem, but unfortunately they got rid of a lot of a treasure trove of great archive TV. Season 8 of Doctor Who suffered quite badly because a lot of that was missing, and the only prints the BBC retained were black and white prints of several episodes. Episodes were sold abroad when the BBC started recovering these things, because of different broadcast standards overseas. I think it's the NTSC broadcast standard in the States. They managed to get them back, but the picture quality wasn't as sharp or wasn't as good as the British edition. So although we had most of the episodes came back, a lot of them stayed in black and white, and a lot of them, when transferred back into PAL broadcast system over here, they didn't have the same sharpness, basically. So we sort of had the lot back, but they weren't great quality. But over the years, technical advances meant the BBC were able to restore a lot of these and bring them back to near enough broadcast quality. And there were some episodes that were only retained in black and white, but there's an extraordinary discovery a few years ago called Chroma Dot Recovery, where they were able to dig into the black and white image on these black and white prints and recover the colour coding that was actually in those episodes. So they managed to bring that back out, and that again restored a lot of the episodes that were in black and white back into colour. Again, they weren't quite broadcast quality, but they were near as damn it. And over the years we've had different releases of different episodes. As the technology improved, they looked better and they looked sharper. But that was always going to be a problem with season 8, because there really is only so much you can do with that sort of thing to get them up to a good quality. And what we have here is a good quality selection of episodes, but they're not the sharpness of series 14, series 18, 19, and so the later seasons that we've had, because of those particular issues. So in terms of the episodes, and I've only sampled a few of them, don't expect that sort of real sharp pinpoint quality that we've been lucky enough to get from the more recent, but the later seasons, when the BBC were aware of the importance of Doctor Who and obviously looked after the archive. So they look good. I've looked at Terror of the Autons. That does look better, because that was one which was had the chroma dot. I believe it had the chroma dot recovery or restoration process, and that's been released on DVD previously. And this does look a little bit sharper, and there is an option to watch that particular story. That's the first story, which introduces Joe Grant and the Master. There's a lot of changes in this season. Season 7 was a slightly darker, more adult version of Doctor Who, but the production team, Barry Letts and Terence Dix, felt it needed sort of pulling back a little bit. So we had Joe Grant, Katie Manning was introduced, Captain Yates from Unit was introduced, and the Master was introduced, and that created what was known as the sort of the Unit family that sort of lasted through 3 years throughout the season. But in terms of picture quality, say Terror of the Autons looks good. It looks a lot better. It's still, there are places where the colour isn't as sharp as you'd want it to be. I mean, you have to accept watching this that it isn't up to today's quality. It isn't up to the quality of the later years of Doctor Who as presented on Blu-ray. But that's because of the problems I've explained, that we didn't have these things, and they've done their best to make them look great. What they've done with Terror of the Autons is updated some of the video effects, some of the shonky CSO, the bedeviled Doctor Who in the 70s. They corrected a lot of that, and there's a particular scene in the first episode where John Pertwee's Doctor is approached by a Time Lord who materialises in thin air dressed as sort of a typical English businessman. In the original version, of course, because it's CSO, you had all this fringing and hazing around it. That's all been tidied up now. The image looks great. So when any sequences involve that sort of thing, that's now been tidied up, so it looks a lot better. I'll also talk about the killer doll that's infamous from part 2. That's been replaced by a new CGI doll, which looks a lot better, except 1 or 2 scenes where it still looks a little bit silly. But obviously it's the animation and the way it's done. It doesn't have that sort of the limitations of the old visual effects. The only other episode I've actually looked at this stage is The Mind of Evil Part 1, because I was interested to see what happened there, because although I think they'd recovered the colour from some episodes, I can't remember the exact details, but there was a problem with Part 1 which remained in black and white. And a guy named Stuart Humphreys, who I believe calls himself Babel Colour, he recoloured that episode, and it came out on DVD when the story was released a few years ago. And it looked okay, but there were some issues. Some of the colours sort of drifted, and the sky in certain scenes sort of drifted from blue to pink and so on. That looks better. It's still, again, with a lot of these episodes, they don't have the sharpness that they would have had when broadcast, and they don't have the sharpness of the Blu-rays that we've had so far. But certainly Mind of Evil looks better. I mean, I would say all these episodes look better than they've ever looked before. But I keep saying it, they're not Blu-ray, they're not high definition. They are standard definition, upgraded to the best technological abilities available to the BBC so far, I imagine. So they look good, but don't expect them to leap off the screen in the way that some of the previous seasons have. In terms of the value-added material, which is where I go first with these sets, I would like to watch the new stuff. First thing I went to was a documentary just over an hour long called Terence and Me, introduced and hosted by Frank Skinner. Of course, we know Frank Skinner from his stand-up comedy and his quiz shows and things he's done on TV, his chat show and fantasy football and all sort of stuff. He's a massive Doctor Who fan, and you might remember he was in a Peter Capaldi episode. I think it was Murder on the Orient Express or something like that. I'm not a huge fan of that era, but he's done this really interesting and quite poignant documentary about Terence Dicks, who we know was one of the architects of Doctor Who in the 70s. He was the script editor, late 60s into the John Pertwee era, and right through to the end of John Pertwee's era. He wrote so many of the target books that are so important to many of us in terms of learning about the history of Doctor Who. And he passed away, I think it was August 2019. This is a really nice tribute, because we don't really know a lot about Terence, apart from the fact that he was a huge figure in the world of Doctor Who. And this documentary, he sort of looks back at his past, finds out a little bit about his past, talks to current Doctor Who writers who've grown up on his work and adored his work. And at the end, he actually goes to his house and meets his wife and has a little chat to his wife and goes up to his office. Interesting anecdote here. Back in 1980, I think it was, I was involved in Doctor Who fandom, and I edited and wrote for a magazine called the Doctor Who Review, one of the early Doctor Who fan magazines. And I and a colleague went to London to meet Terence Dicks, and we went to his house to interview him. Now, I don't have incredibly sharp memories of that, but there's a sequence in this documentary where Frank Skinner goes into Terence's office, which was like a attic-y sort of room, which was converted. Now it's full of books, clutter, and lots of VHS video tapes, and obviously he's not been there for the best part of 2 years. But I sort of, there's a scene where there's a skylight window, and I sort of remember being in that room and doing the interview and talking to him. I wish I could remember it a bit more sharply. I remember that he gave me an autographed copy of a hardback of The Horns of Nimon, which hadn't come out as yet, which I no longer have, unfortunately. I disposed of it years ago when I got rid of a lot of Doctor Who stuff. But I was wondering, when I was watching this documentary, well, I went to Terence's house. Is it the same house? And his wife in the documentary says, well, we've been here since 1972, I think she said. So yeah, it was clearly the same place. I don't remember anything much except being up in that room. I just remember a small room, and I remember the skylight. It was quite interesting to watch this documentary. Well, I've been in that room. So that was a very interesting little piece. Also very interesting is a thing called I think it's called The Devil's Return. It's not actually named on the back here, but it's got Katie Manning and John Levine, who played Sergeant Benton, going back to Albourne in Wiltshire, where The Demons, the final story of the season, was filmed, and it's one of the most famous Doctor Who stories of all time. Beautiful little village, sort of almost trapped in time, because it's sort of timeless, classic English village. And they go back there. It's a little bit similar to the one that Katie Manning did with Stuart Bevan on the 10th anniversary at the 10th season, of The Green Death, where they went to Derry which incidentally is just up the road from me, and talked to a lot of the locals who were there when the Green Death was made. And this is a similar one where John Levine and Katie Manning meet some people who were in Alborn when the filming was done. Obviously they were kids at the time, and they've got fond memories of the BBC descending upon this peaceful village for 5 days or something and filming this Doctor Who story. That's a very nice little piece. Also very nice little piece is called The Direct Route, which has Michael Ferguson and Timothy Coombe, who directed some of the season 8 serials, and Graham Harper, who's directed the show more recently. They do a 700-mile plus road trip from London down to Dungeness, down to Cornwall, back round to Alborn, and all points in between, because this season is actually every story got quite a lot of location filming, which is unusual for Doctor Who at the time. And they go and revisit those locations and discuss how the episodes were made, if they were involved in them, or just discuss technically how they look and how they stand up today. And that's really interesting. And again, quite a nice piece, because these guys are all in their 70s now, their careers are behind them. But going back to these places brings back memories, not just of their time working on Doctor Who, but of their time working in the industry when things were very different and the pace of storytelling and so on was very different. Really interesting piece. And the other one I've watched is In Conversation, Matthew Sweet and Katie Manning. This is lovely. It's an hour and a quarter, I think. And it's not all about Doctor Who. Doctor Who sort of begins it, and then Katie Manning talks about her incredible life. Things I didn't know about her life as a sort of rebellious teen. The people that she was involved with, the people that she knew. She tries not to name drop, but she was friends with so many iconic people in the 60s and 70s, like Jimi Hendrix and Liza Minnelli and James Mason. Look them up on Wikipedia if you don't know them. But then she became into Doctor Who, and it focuses on Doctor Who at the end, but it's just a refreshingly candid and honest and fascinating story of a great and underrated actress. Yeah, and I think she's one of those people who, I think she says in the interview, you know, she never wanted to be a star, never thought she was going to be a big star. She just wanted to be a working, jobbing actress, which is what she considers herself to be. And of course, these days, she is sort of like a spokesman for that era of Doctor Who, because sadly most of the others at the time are no longer there. So those are the main things that I've watched so far. We've also got the usual behind the sofa episodes, usually 25-30 minutes, where various Doctor Who alumni watch these episodes, and I've watched a couple of bits of those. I'm not a big fan. I'm not really into that sort of goggle box watching people watching TV. But these are a bit more interesting because obviously Doctor Who people. And you've got again Katie Manning and Stuart Bevan. You've got Anjali Mohindra and Sasha Dhawan, who plays the Master these days. And of course you've got Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding, who always turn up for a day out for these things. And they're just discussing. I think they watch highlights of the episodes and then talk about them. They're good fun, but not necessarily essential. There's some new bits and pieces as well, some new archive stuff that's been found. As I said, the 90-minute version of the Demons, and there's, which I probably will look at next, The Vampire from Space, an extended edit of the first episode of Claws of Axos. So I'll probably watch that to spot the differences, as it were. So that's just a quick run through of the new season 8 box set. It's available now, as I said. I think you'll have to have ordered it now to get hold of it. So if you're waiting for it to come in the post, little teaser about what's in store. Because unfortunately, as I say, they are limited edition. They do tend to sell out very quickly, and then they suddenly become available for ridiculous prices on certain websites, auction sites. But it's another great set. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Pertwee era anyway. I just love the way that these things are made with such love and reverence and absolute dedication to providing the best possible product for Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who fans. So if you've got it on order, if it's arrived, get stuck in. If it hasn't arrived, you've got a fantastic treat to look forward to. That's me done. Hope this was okay for you. Apologies again for the wobbly camera work earlier on. But join me soon for another video where I shall talk about more stuff. Thank you.